Last July, the United States and its allies reached an agreement with Iran to roll back its nuclear program in exchange for relief from some economic sanctions. And skeptics of the deal at the time predicted that it would yield a giant payday for Iran. But a recent report by former Treasury officials and other sanctions experts conclude that, and I'm going to quote here, contrary to myriad public claims, the implementation of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action did not lead to a $100 to $150 billion immediate windfall for the Iranian regime and a rapid groundswell of new investment revenue. So, Undersecretary Szubin, I just want to highlight this point. How much relief has Iran actually received from previously frozen assets so far under the nuclear deal?
There's about $50 billion in previously escrowed assets that Iran now has full legal access to as a result of coming into compliance with their nuclear commitment.
Okay, so they have $50 billion that they will have legal access to. Have they accessed all of that yet?
So that's a trickier question to answer because it's not Iran's goal to move all those 50 to someplace new.
Fair enough, but we're looking at 50. That's all I needed.
We're looking at
50. That's kind of the top number there. And how does that number compare to Iran's domestic economic needs?
It's dwarfed by those economic needs. We've testified in the past, and we continue to assess that Iran is facing about $500 billion in economic needs just to bring their economy back to ground level.
So at least 10 times the amount that they received in the frozen from the previously frozen assets,
including things like unpaid pensions and raided funds that Iran needs to now reconstitute.
Okay, so it seems like it's a very small amount then in comparison to their full economic needs.
I would agree with that characterization.
Okay. Iranian officials are complaining about what they see as the slow pace of sanctions relief and the lack of additional foreign investment that they expected as a result of the nuclear deal. But Iran faces barriers to foreign investment that go well beyond the complexities of long-standing nuclear-related sanctions that were recently lifted. Iran has a long history of money laundering, terrorist financing, corruption, all of which deter foreign investment and contribute to Iran's bad reputation globally. So, Undersecretary Szubin, instead of blaming the United States for its failure to emerge from economic isolation, what steps should Iran be taking if it wants to become a responsible member of the international financial and commercial system?
Well, that's a critically important question, and the answer it calls for is quite a long one, because as you note, there's concerns about Iran's behavior across a whole range of conduct. Obviously, being designated by the international standard-setting body on money laundering and corruption, the FATF, as on their blacklist is not a good place to be if you're trying to attract investment, if you're trying to attract trade. To the credit of President Rouhani in Iran, I think they're finally internalizing the fact that if they don't start addressing these areas, they're not going to see the foreign business come in, they're not going to see the investment pour in. And so we do see Iran probably for the first time grappling with some of these issues.
So Iran may comply with the nuclear deal and get the sanctions lifted, but if they fail to grapple with their other problems, with terrorist financing, with the lack of transparency in their economy, then you're saying they really are not going to be able to rejoin the nation's economic system and not be able to build much of a future for themselves.
There's a lot of truth to that, Senator. I do try to resist sort of the black or white analysis here because I think the reality is somewhere in between. And we're accused in some corners of having generated a windfall for Iran. That's not the case. We're accused by the Iranians of having provided zero sanctions relief and therefore reneging on our commitments. That's not the case. First of all, we fulfilled every one of our commitments. With respect to the business climate, it's complicated, and there are a lot of factors that are causing banks and institutions to pause. As I said, there's some progress that we see from Iran, but there's a long way for them to go. And I think your bottom line conclusion that it's going to take some time is accurate. I think Iran has a lot of work to do.
Well, I think it's very important, though, as Congress goes forward, because, it's no secret that there are some people in Congress who are committed to seeing the Iran nuclear arrangement fail at any price. And we're hearing a lot of rumbling about holding up sanctions relief even if Iran complies with the deal, which may be good politics for some senators, but it seems to me that it plays directly into the hands of the hardliners in Iran who want to blame the West for their economic woes. As you rightly point out, Iran must implement serious structural reforms, crack down on money laundering, stop sponsoring terrorism if it wants to attract sustained investment. But the best way to change Iran's behavior is to keep the pressure on. The worst is to try to score political points in a way that gives the Iranians an excuse not to make the changes that they need to make. Seems to me that our job is to make sure that if Iran rejects comprehensive reforms, then it has no one to blame for its economic problems except itself. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I agree, Senator.